I'll go ahead and get started, Christian,
Yep.
And then if I'll yield back the balance of my time here if we have extra time. So
Great.
I'm going to talk to you guys about Staker DAO. The topic of this is why DAOs are the future of decentralized finance. We're really excited about the DAO that we're building. And I'm also really excited about a bunch of other DAOs that are under construction or are ongoing in the space. And so I'm going to try and give a little bit of background about why I think all this is important, and then specifically what we're doing at Staker, and then we'll roll into the other panels after this. So the compliance notice you see on the screen is de rigueur these days, I suppose. I need to make sure you all know that I'm going to be talking about a couple of tokens, the Staker token and the Blend token. I'm not giving financial advice. Do your own research. And there's a growing body of research out there on DAOs and on what Staker DAO is doing. So that's kind of exciting, actually, to be able to do your own independent research. And then in particular, when I talk about the Blend token, I just need to let everyone know that that is not something that is available to US persons. The initial sale with CoinList that just went live this week is for people outside of the US. Unfortunately, that's the regulatory regime that we all live in. So let's kick this thing off and talk about why DAOs matter, why launch a DAO. And kind of my big picture story here is that you know, humans are tribal by nature. We spent 20,000 years living on the savannah, living, you know, in different parts of the world in tribes, in villages. It all kind of centralized in the Industrial Revolution, the Renaissance Industrial Revolution. We started to build these gigantic organizations. The 20th century is, you know, what I would call peak centralization, you know, where we had these super large companies and institutions and governments, even religions, all those things. I think that's an anomaly. I think that we centralized because the cost of getting and managing and acting on information was very high, but there was a real reason to do it, i.e. commerce. But now the price of information is being driven to zero. Coase's theorem, for those of you who like to nerd out on the Nobel Prize-winning economist research. And as that cost of information goes to zero, I think the size of the firm goes to zero as well. And one of the missing key elements from Coase's day was trustless finance and being able to trust financial decision making and financial instruments without having to trust the people behind them. And as a result of needing to trust the people behind financial decisions, we have really large financial organizations. But now with blockchain, we really have an opportunity to make a difference there. And so I think we're going from the village of 20,000 years. I think in 50 years, a lot of us are going to be back in the village. And certainly with COVID and now with Black Lives Matter movement here in the United States and everywhere around the world, movements of the populace to try and find the villages that matter to them is going to be a ongoing theme here for the next couple of decades. And I think DAOs have an opportunity to play a really important part in helping govern that at a local level. Local being whatever your community of crypto enthusiasts happen to be in our case here. So we all know there have been DAOs, a couple of key DAOs that people like to talk about. I think that the DAO, when it came out on the scene on Ethereum, was amazing, and the fact that it caused a schism in Ethereum is really interesting, and a lot of lessons have been learned since then, and a lot of lessons haven't been learned since then, I think we see. But MakerDAO has a really interesting model now. You've got the LAO, which is a for-profit DAO model that is really interesting. We're going to be talking on a panel tomorrow about DAOs and DAO architectures, and those guys are going to be joining us as well. And so anyway, there's a lot of DAO activity going on. Our DAO, Staker DAO, builds on some of the architecture that Maker brought to the fore, the fact that we have a multi-token model where we have one token that's a governance token, and that governance token is being used to make decisions about other products, DeFi products. And the Blend token is our first DeFi product that's launching, and we'll talk a little bit about that. But what is most interesting for the beginning of this discussion is the governance models and the governance tokens and how those are being used for decision making in these DAOs. And in our case, we've taken the contrarian position, I guess. I'd say that our governance token at launch here is a security. And while that may be a contrarian position versus Maker or Compound or UMA or synthetics, it's probably more closely aligned with regulatory regimes, especially here in the United States. And because we're treating it as a security, it means that you're not going to see staker tokens floating around as utilities anytime soon, where you can buy and sell them anywhere you want. We actually went through a fairly formal fundraising process to sell our staker tokens. And we now have about 30 or so staker token holders, which are largely traditional investor types, venture capitalists, angel investors, crypto, a number of kind of crypto investor types who have longstanding positions. And then also in our governance model, we have a nice number of organizations that fill the role of validator in the proof of stake space, and I'll talk to that in a minute. And then the governance decision making that these people are making are about the financial products that we launch. Blend being the first one of those. Again, like I said, we'll cover that in a minute. But let's first talk about, not all governance models are equal, certainly. And when we were trying to figure out how to launch our DAO, we spent quite a bit of time thinking about and designing the governance model first. And I have the advantage here, I would say, in that I have really gone deeply down the Tezos rabbit hole. For the 2.5 to 3 years prior to launching Staker DAO, I was really focused on Tezos. It's one of the first people to build community in the Tezos ecosystem, even before the fundraiser, back when there was only about 10 people on a Slack channel. And then I was one of the first people to build a team that launched one of the first validators, or bakers as we call them, in the Tezos ecosystem. And that baker grew to be the largest validator in Tezos for about a year. Now it's no longer the largest. It's not actually anywhere near the largest, because we've had a lot of new validators come to Tezos, and we've had over 400 validators now, 480, 490 validators around the world running the Tezos software. But we have big guys like Coinbase and Binance, Kraken, who are also running validator nodes, and so it's interesting to see the flow of tokens and validation rights around the Tezos ecosystem, and they've kind of flowed to those bigger players, centralized players, which is kind of interesting. Not great for the smaller independent traditional validators, and we'll see how that evolves, and hopefully StakerDAO can have a say in that as well. But we thought about governance a lot, and we decided that the Tezos governance model is something really compelling, and it's something to look at seriously, and it's something to potentially build on. And we like to build on it. The reason why I say it's compelling and why we thought about building on it was because Tezos has had an abnormally high participation rate in its governance decision making. And I think a lot of that goes to the initial architecture that was put in place. It's not a straight one coin, one vote model per se. In fact, it's a representative model. And so people who are token holders, they currently, they delegate their validation rights to the bakers. As I mentioned, there's about 500 of them. Those bakers aggregate those validation rights, which generate rewards that then flow back to token holders. but they also are aggregating the voting rights in concert with those validation rights. Now, it's possible over time that Tezos will change and voting will get separated, voting rights will get separated from validation rights, but today we have about 400 to 500 active participants in voting. And as you can see on this screen in the right-hand lower corner there, the results have been really strong. Tezos has had, I think, 4 on-chain governance processes that have flowed through it since it went live, approaching 2 years now. And the participation rates have been off the chart. 70 to 80 to 90% participation in each of these complex decision-making processes. And I think Tezos has probably evolved itself more in those 4 governance processes than just about any other chain has evolved in that time frame. Certainly more than the top 10 chains have evolved for sure, which is really interesting. It's decentralized and it's evolving at a pretty good clip. And so we liked that governance model. We said, let's apply that governance model to a DAO. And so that's essentially what we've done with Staker, and I'll share that in a minute. We also looked at other models to see if we wanted to copy them. And Maker, like, while we love the multi-token model of Maker, we don't love the governance model of Maker as it exists today. They have terrible participation rates in their governance decision making, 2, 3, 4, 10% maybe, typically. And I'm not sure. I'm not a Maker expert, so I don't want to attribute that to any one thing in particular. But I do think having everyone vote on everything is a challenge, and I think that Maker is sort of also possibly a model where the token idea came first, the DAI came first, and then the governance came second. And as a result, I don't know if that's exactly true, but as a result of that, you end up with a lot of investors who are holding that governance token for the profit side of it, who are not necessarily so engaged on the actual decision-making side of it. And now we have Compound DAOifying itself, I guess I'd say. You know, it kind of started with a cool product idea and venture capital investments, and then now it's starting to issue its governance tokens as utilities. I think maybe I think they put down a plan for that, but they also are having challenging discussions around their governance model. So while they have interesting proposals flowing through their system, some of their investors are not happy about how the governance model works, and they're, you know, creating some interesting challenges. So all this is being said to communicate to you guys that if you're gonna put a DAO model in place, think long and hard about the governance first. Our governance model, as I mentioned, is largely based on Tezos. And if you go to our governance dashboard, which is at governance.stakerdao.com, maybe Christian, if you have a second, you can drop that into the chat panel so people can look at that, and also maybe a link to our forum. You'll find that we have a really interesting display of every proposal that has been submitted, links to all the discussions that have gone on in the forums through those proposals, and then the vote of the council members for each proposal. And it's all done on chain, and we're running this all on Tezos, as I mentioned. So we actually, I think we have the first token. I think we launched the first real token on Tezos that is being used on an ongoing basis, certainly to manage governance process besides the layer 1 network. Our governance process, as you see here on the left, is 4 phases. It runs once a month. So every month, the new governance cycle starts. Each of the 4 phases is 1 week long. The first phase is where proposals are submitted on chain to be considered. The second phase, week 2, is where the proposals are discussed. The third phase is where the council, the elected council, votes for the proposal. And then week 4, that's the third week. And then the 4th week is where the proposal, if it's passed, is implemented or is begun to be implemented by the operations team. And so we have kind of 3 parties in this thing. We have the token holders, which are the Staker token holders, again, the investors. They get to work with the operations team to finalize proposals that are put on chain. And then the token holders, the community also elects the council, and the council is a 5-member council that actually votes yes or no for the proposals that are put on chain. And then if the council approves the proposal, then the operations team is responsible for delivering the results, and the operations team ultimately is hired and fired by the council, which is elected by the community. So you have this interesting 3-party system over time that really comes back to community token holder rights. So we're pretty excited about how that works. And one of the things that we believe is that, you know, if you're going to put a representative model in place, you want to make sure that your community is engaged, and you want to make sure that we're electing people who really want to be passionate about the decision-making process and about what the DAO is doing. And I think we were really lucky to get there in our first iteration of a council. In fact, our council was largely selected at the same time that we launched the token this year. So in fairness, this is kind of a hand-curated council, starter council, with Olaf and Shashav, Luke from Coinbase, and then Spencer and myself. And Spencer, I'm watching you because you're competing with us in this session, running your own session right now. Anyway, the point is, we got this started, and we kind of have jump-started all of this here as of January 1st of this year. The first election cycle with all of the new staker token holders will happen next year in Q1. And so that council will probably change significantly, maybe a little bit, I don't know, but based on staker token holder desires on an annual basis. And one of the cool things is all of this governance process is managed by governments. So if the community wants to change elements of this, when the elections are, or how many people are on the council, or even if the representative model is the right one to go with, that can all be debated, discussed, put on chain for a proposal, ratified, and then implemented. So the whole thing can evolve itself over time. It could even evolve off Tezos if it wanted to. It could move to a different chain if it decided at some point in time there was a better chain for running a decentralized protocol on, but I'm not sure that there is right now. Okay, so having said that, one of the things that we know about DAOs today is they are very thematic. Most of the ones that you've heard about are financial oriented. We're working on staking tokens primarily right now. Maker is obviously producing DAI. Venture DAO, the Meta Cartel project is focused on investments like the original DAO. There are game DAOs that are emerging. There's all kinds of cool DAOs, but they're all very thematic, as I mentioned. And so, you know, we're focused on the staking space for our DAO right now because we think it's a really rich space that has a lot of opportunity to create some really interesting synthetic products across many different chains. But we also think that the thematic nature of DAOs could evolve over time. And I'll touch on that at the end. But because we're focused on the staking space right now, our governance process, which launched on January 1st, has gone through January, February, March, April, May. It's gone through 5 governance cycles. And in each of those cycles, a proposal was put on chain that developed an idea that was originally nurtured by the original participants in the project when it launched. And that was launching a token that would be a synthetic representation of staking tokens. And that's where this concept of a blend token has emerged. And so if you go back and look at our governance cycle, each month you'll see the proposal evolved with more and more complexity and more specificity about how the blend token, as we call it now, how the blend token evolved. And what has happened here so far is a lot of action in just a few number of months. So we're only into just the beginning of June here, and as of May 31st, so just over the weekend, the blend token itself, a sale for the blend token started. So the blend token is we call it a tracking token. It's actually an ERC20 token, and it is a fully collateralized basket token. So if you hold one blend token as an ERC20 token, you're holding a fully collateralized position in a set of proof of stake tokens. And the initial basket, it has 3 tokens in it. It has Tezos, it has Cosmos, and it has Algorand. And we went through a fairly comprehensive process of building an algorithm that would determine which tokens should be in that basket. We'll touch on that a little bit. But at the end of the day, those 3 tokens are what our governance process has decided are the blue chip POS tokens of today. And so when you're holding a blend token, you're actually holding an equivalent value of the positions in Tezos, Cosmos, and Algorand. And one of the cool things about those proof of stake tokens is that, because they're proof of stake, they're assuming you delegate their staking rights or you run your own nodes, you're generating an ongoing set of rewards by running those blockchains. And by running those blockchains and keeping things secure, you're generating rewards that then are distributed back to the token holders. And so in our case, because we have this ERC20 token that represents, an instrument that mirrors these proof of stake tokens, we came up with kind of a novel way to manage that distribution. And so what happens in our world is we raise funds for the blend token. In fact, the fundraising process is on CoinList. It just kicked off over the weekend, as I mentioned. Christian can drop a link to anyone who wants to go to blendtoken.com who's not a US person to learn more about that. But the funds are raised through this initial offering. The funds are used to purchase an equivalent value of Tezos, Cosmos, and Algorand. So 100% of the funds raised are then put into the basket tokens. The basket tokens are, the validation rights are delegated out to the validators that were selected through the governance process. And if you go back to staker governance, you'll see the discussion forums and the voting process where we selected who those validators are going to be. And those validators then start using those validation rights to produce blocks, and that then generates rewards for those validators, and then those rewards come back to StakerDAO, right? So like all of that is kind of the standard way of how proof of stake tokens work today. But the unique thing that happens here is that when those staking rights or staking rewards come into StakerDAO, we have a Ethereum smart contract that essentially is part centralized and part decentralized, and we'll talk about that later as well. But the Ethereum smart contract essentially takes the operations team takes the rewards that come in, let's say on a monthly basis, and sells them in the market for in this case it sells it for USDC, and then the USDC is put into the Ethereum smart contract, and then on a monthly basis the Ethereum smart contracts accepts bids from accepts bids from blend token holders, and blend token holders can basically sell their blend back to StakerDAO through an auction model for the USDC. And so essentially what happens is every month there'll be, if you are a registered blend token holder, you'll be able to put some of your blend tokens back to StakerDAO in return for a USDC payout. And you can set the price at what you want to sell your blend tokens back to us. And then the auction model will essentially, the smart contract will run on a monthly basis and clear that at the best price for StakerDAO. And so essentially what's going to happen is the rewards that were generated are then distributed via USDC to blend token holders. And the blend tokens that were bought back are burned at the time of buyback. And so we basically are taking all of the rewards that come in from the various blockchains, turning them into USDC, selling them in a buyback model for the blend tokens, and then shrinking the supply of blend. And all that essentially causes a reduction in the supply of blend, while the underlying assets that support that blend supply remain constant over time. And so it's kind of a nifty way to mimic the distribution of rewards to the blend token holders without actually dealing with regular income, dealing with the wallets, dealing with the staking rights. And like on Cosmos, you have to like have applications running to pull out your staking rights and then redelegate them. It's all very complex, as folks know. And so basically, we've taken a lot of that complexity, put it into a single ERC20 token, and made it available for people to be able to just buy it, hold it, sell it. We think it's something that's going to become very popular in the DeFi space. We'd love to talk to you more about both of those things, both the blend token and the staker token at some point in time if you're interested. The proof of stake space in general has been a great performer. The returns for proof of stake, I'm sure you all are following this kind of stuff, have been really strong versus Bitcoin and other tokens over the last, even just this year, over the last year. We think the proof of stake space in general is going to have a really strong set of long-term values associated with it that we're all pretty excited about. We're also excited about other tokens. So we're excited about Polkadot. We think it might find its way into the basket. We're excited about seeing where ETH2 goes. It might find its way into the basket. How ETH2 evolves and how the staking rights of that emerge is going to be really interesting to follow. And it's certainly within the domain of what StakerDAO is interested in. Having said all that, I think over the next 5 years, DAOs like StakerDAO are going to become more community-driven and less thematic. I think we believe that a venture like StakerDAO has the right legal structure in place. I didn't talk much about it, but it's a Cayman entity that runs the DAO. It has the right regulatory models in place so that it can issue many different kinds of tokens and participate in many different kinds of financial systems over the years, all while being guided by a growing base of token holders who are helping make good decisions on how the DAO operates, and then who are profiting from those decisions over time. And so, we would love to see Staker go into other kinds of assets, everything from NFTs to real world real estate assets and things like that over time. It's really going to be up to the community on how StakerDAO evolves, and that's what our governance process is all about. And that's why I'm so excited about DAOs, because it's no longer just a couple of people sitting around making decisions about the future of their company. It's a growing base of passionate people who all get to contribute to the success of the company and then get to profit from it. So that's my 30-minute talk, and I will be happy to answer any questions. Maybe Christian can ask me anything that he saw of relevance.
No, I think that was a good overview. I know there's a lot. Please feel free to reach out directly to us if you have any follow-ups. I think, Jonas, the one question I would have for you is if you would maybe tell us in your own words, maybe the 1 or 2 line sentence about really what StakerDAO is trying to recap of what it is.
What are we trying to build? So I think we're trying to build a community-driven financial services company that at the end of the day is going to be really focused on building decentralized products in a compliant way, in a secure way, and in a decentralized way that is led by a growing set of community members around the world.
I think hopefully that sums it up for some people. Of course, makes sense for me because I'm part of this, but thank you everyone for tuning in. It was a nice 30 minutes. Everybody.